Shawn here from DreamCarXchange.
Yeah, hey everyone, how we doing?
So here to bring you our latest video in our Would You Rather series. You know, it's where we compare two cars, we look at the exteriors, interiors, and then take them for the all-important test drive.
These are both my personal cars. I was just pulling them out earlier from the garage today, and it's kind of unique because they usually don't come out together. So, because I'm usually the one that's driving them. But yeah, it's kind of like choosing between your own kids. It's going to definitely be a tough one today. So we have a 1991 Porsche 911 Turbo, so it's a 964 Turbo, so 5-speed manual. And then we have the 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo that's been in a couple other videos that we've had. So 6-speed manual. So again, it looks like a kind of a strange matchup between these, but you know, they're really about, you got turbo 6 in the back, 5-speed manual. We have rear-wheel drive, we got all-wheel drive, mid-engine, 6-speed, normally aspirated, but they're around the same price point. So, you know, generally speaking, you know, both these cars can be had somewhere in the 90 to 100K range. So, you know, very different cars, you know, 16 years old, almost 30 years old. Very different feels to them, but they're both fun in their own way. So it'll be an interesting one today, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, same here.
All right, so exterior of the 911 Turbo. So to me, you know, kind of the classic 911 line still in this car, right? But with the wide body. And to me, personally, this is the best looking 911 ever made. Is the 964 Turbo. So very similar to the 930s that were out in the 70s and 80s, so 911 Turbos then. But, you know, cleaned up bumpers, cleaned up side skirts, the rear's a little bit cleaned up, you know, so from an aesthetic standpoint, it has the same sheet metal, but it's just kind of the bumpers and the, you know, side skirts and things like that that make it look a lot more modern than what the other ones look like.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'm somewhere probably right in between. I love the 930s also.
Sure.
I mean, I'm a few years older than you, so that was my dream
my
car.
first
The 930
was a 930.
It was absolutely my favorite. So the wide body, you know, in the turbo look, but yeah, I do agree. It brought it up.
Yeah,
it modernized it a bit here and there.
Absolutely. So. And this particular car, this has aftermarket 18-inch, which looks like the Turbo 3.6 wheels, which I love the look of these. You know, so I think it makes it look even better than having the stock 17s, and so the car looks like, you know, the Bad Boys movie from '94, even though that's a 3.6 turbo, but it looks very similar to it, particularly because of the wheels.
So do anything stance-wise?
This car does have aftermarket shocks. It has a set of Bilstein coilovers. Put them on a while ago, and about a year and a half ago, changed the stance on it, lowered the front just a little bit, and lowered the back a little bit more, where it, to me, has that kind of hunkered down look, again, particularly with the wide body. And for me, this is the right stance for the car now.
I love it. I think it's perfect. Yeah. Let's take a look at the exterior of the Gallardo. First thing, it's just the color. Yeah. I mean, the color is just fantastic. It's a blue callum. I think that's what how we believe it's pronounced. Yeah. But translation, metallic blue. It's really medium blue. Takes a lot of different shades and different lights.
Yeah, certain lights it looks like a little darker out. It'll look a little bit purplish.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a darker color. To me, when I first bought the car, or when I first saw it, it's what really drew me to it, because, you know, I was always looking at the, you know, the pearl orange, the pearl yellow, and this I'd never seen on it, and it just kind of hit me. Well,
and that's different too, because I think, you know, we've gone to shows, we've seen, you know, a dozen Gallardos together. Never seen this color though. You see all the orange, the yellow, the green, but the color is just fantastic. And you know, with these aftermarket ADV1 wheels and that charcoal kind of gunmetal look, it's just, you know, it kind of mutes the overall appearance. You know, for a Lambo, you know, that's sometimes hard to say, but it really tones it down a bit, and just in the right way. You know, even when you bring it to the black calipers, it really it lets the color just really pop.
Yeah,
which
I
is
agree.
Beautiful. You know, silhouette, we've talked about it before, you know, angular, but still has some really nice curves to it altogether. Kind of sweeps all the way to the front. Then the short nose here, it really starts to get sharp there. I mean, that angle of attack if you will, right from the nose. It's just so steep down. You got your, you know, forward cab. You can't even see the front at all when you're driving it. It's almost as if it's not there because it's so short. But just a beautiful car, beautiful look.
And, you know, honestly, I think it's 16 years old. This is the first year of the Gallardo, and you know, I think it's aged really well, right? You know, and it's definitely held up, and you know, I really love the look of it. I really do.
I agree.
All right, so interior of the 911. So basically, it is like every other 911, with the exception of the boost gauge here that's in the electronic center part of the tack. So 5 gauges. Everything else, again, identical. When they moved to the 964, they put in this center console here, which kind of makes it a little more modern, a little bit more, you know, a little bit more modern to it. And you know, everything else is pretty much the same. They had airbags now, which is different. The seats, these particular ones, these are the sports seats. So like the bolsters stick out quite a bit, both on the back and the thighs, which are great when you get in. You know, you kind of rub on the way in and out a bit. And this particular one has the black piping, which is kind of neat.
They're really nice.
Yeah, but everything else, again, typical 911. So you got your small seats back here, which is neat because I got, you know, have young kids now. So my daughter, she's 9, she'll hop back there as long as I put the seat up. And you know, how cool is that?
Yeah. So. All right, so let's take a look at the interior of the Gallardo. You know, little wide sill getting in for me, lot different than Shawn. We've often talked about it. Shawn's much bigger, so interior feels are a lot different when we compare these. You know, I mean, centerpiece right here, the gated 6-speed. So that, you know, when you talk about, you know, this and kind of the Audi feel for a lot of the stuff on the interior here, certainly all Italian, you know, exterior and styling and everything, but you do have some different feel here for, you know, that Audi influence here. Steering wheel, you got the flat bottom, which is nice. And I think again that was pretty new for the time. So this again is an 04. Alcantara headliner, pretty roomy for me. I know, you know, for Shawn it's a little tighter in here, but altogether it's comfortable. You know, we highlighted the really aggressive bolsters in the turbo. Not quite as aggressive here. Certainly bolsters, you know, thighs, and again the torso. For me, these probably actually fit you a little better than the turbo. Fits me really nice. I'm pretty snug in there.
It does.
This gives me a little more. There's a little wiggle for me here, but it's still nice and tight. Not as aggressive altogether, though.
Yeah, and what's interesting in these is I noticed that the thigh bolsters are very stiff, right, and the back, you know, and torso ones are not as much, right. So again, it could be from a comfort perspective, what have you, but. Again, just kind of 2 different approaches.
When you look at this car from the outside, I don't know that you get the same feel that you would from looking out these really angular windows and this small window in the back. You know, you get good vision through the mirror here.
Let's take a look at the 911. So as all 911s, in the back. And what you see here is a big intercooler, right? So that was actually one of the big changes when they went to the 964 turbos. The 930 turbos were probably about that big and about that thick. This takes up the vast majority of the engine bay, right? So any kind of maintenance from up top perspective, usually they're taking that off. But you know, again, kind of air cooled fan there. Everything else, you know, again, kind of quintessential 911.
All right, so let's take a quick look at the Gallardo engine. So I think you mentioned, I mean, option-wise, you could have a clear panel here.
Correct, yeah, they call it the clear bonnet, which was like $4,000 or something crazy.
I like the louvers anyway.
Yeah,
it's the kind of thin, nice louver look altogether. Again, spoiler comes up at speed, but so V10, close to 500 horsepower. Was it 493?
Yeah, it was 500.
500. So modifications, fab-speed exhaust system.
Yeah, so all it is it's a fab-speed X-pipe muffler, which it was all about sound. I mean, it may give it a few more ponies, but it's all about the difference in the sound.
Yeah, and it's incredible. We'll hear that later on for sure. test drive the Lamborghini. First impressions, I know we talked about the interior earlier, but you know, for me, very comfortable, great vision. You know, we talked about that really slanted, short nose, so I can't really see any of that. So it's such a steep angle. But surprisingly, from the exterior view, when we talked about the height of the windows, you do get a really good vision altogether, which is a pleasant surprise. As expected, just incredible grip. Steering is very precise. It's not as light as you might think. Product of the all-wheel drive. Wow, I love the sound of that. We talked about the aftermarket exhaust. That just screams, and we really weren't even that high up in the RPMs there. We'll get out into a highway in a little bit, and we're going to be able to this thing scream, and that's just incredible. I love the sound of this. Alright, so we're taking it out on a little more open road now. We get some clear traffic here, so we can let this long first gear out and really hear this thing scream. In summary, from a driver's positioning, I just love the seats feel really comfortable. Surprising vision all the way around out the car. Again, they have that really short back window, but still gives you really good vision from the mirrors. Clutch feels really, really nice, really light. Love the gated 6-speed here. The shifter pulls you right into the next gear. To admit, when I first time ever with one of these gated shifters, I was a little intimidated, but very smooth. It almost just locks you right into gear. Can't believe how long that first gear is. You know, you're watching the RPMs come up, and you just can't even believe that you're still, 3,000 RPMs to go, and this first gear just keeps going and going. A ton of torque in this car. I mean, it's just screaming to go. Fairly compliant over the bumps. We were going through some developments here that had some bumps, and goes over them fairly nice. Real treat to drive this. This is a really fun test drive.
Alright, so here we are in the Lambo again. Again, quick refresher, 2004 Lamborghini Gallardo, V10 5-liter, 500 horsepower, 398 torque stock. Has a little bit more than that, probably just a hair. It's got an aftermarket fab speed X-pipe muffler. The main thing is just the sound of it. It makes it sound much better than stock. So hopping in this after the turbo, definitely stiffer. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you feel every bump compared to that car, that's for sure. Again, the clickety-clack of the gated manual, it just doesn't get old. So actually trailing the 911 Turbo right now, and they're just so cool looking from the back. The wide body, the wide hips. one thing about this car compared to the Turbo, definitely more torque right away. Doesn't obviously need the boost to spool up as it being, this one being normally aspirated. So, you know, throttle response and things like that is much more instantaneous in this car compared to the Turbo, that's for sure. Certainly a lot louder in here than the Turbo. Love the exhaust sound on this. I mean, just how linear it pulls all the way up. We didn't, you know, that time maybe 5,000, maybe 6,000 RPMs. But it just feels and sounds fantastic. Definitely not as comfortable as that car, believe it or not. Again, just because of the dimensions of it. You know, this one's a little tight. Kind of have the seat, and you know, not in the normal position in order to fit in here a little bit better. So, you know, from a seat comfort and positioning standpoint, this is not as comfortable as the 911. White lines, again, a lot less here. Good view of the straight ahead, but you know, a little bit less, you know, in the back. 3/4 view is definitely a little bit more compromised than what you see in the 911. In this, I can't see the front bumper. I can't see where it drops off, where I can, you know, see a little bit better. Have a good sense of where the front of the car is in the 911. So steering feels a little bit lighter, I think, than the Turbo. Very similar firmness in the brake pedal. Clutch also feels a little bit lighter than that car. And obviously, very different kind of shifting feel with the gated manual versus the more traditional shifter in that car. Yeah, so just comparing the two cars, just very different feels from a driving experience. Again, turbo versus non-turbo. This being, even though this car is 16 years old, it's definitely much more of a modern car, particularly because the Turbo, you know, the engine in that car originated back in the 70s, really, and it was a carryover from the 930, you know, in the 80s. So that car's definitely been around for a while. 964 generation obviously had a bunch of upgrades to the 911, suspension and a little bit in the interior, and like I said earlier, kind of airbags and anti-lock brakes and things like that. But you know, it's still much more of a older technology or older car, and it definitely feels like it when you drive it. I mean, this definitely feels much more like a modern car. And again, non-turbo versus turbo, you know, different sounds. Again, just you can kind of feel the personalities, you know, a German car versus an Italian car, even though a lot of the underpinnings of this is German through Audi. You can definitely tell the characteristics difference between the two cars.
All right, so we're test driving the 911 Turbo. You know, we talked about the interior, so seating position, excellent. Talked about these big bolsters. Feels really comfy in here. As expected, vision is just outstanding. Just what a clear field of vision all the way around. Kind of, you really know where you are in this car, and kind of the outer boundaries of the body everywhere. You can kind of see what's going out through all these windows. One thing, I mean, first impression wise, I know we talked about the interiors, but kind of sitting in it and driving it now, it definitely brings me back. Again, this car almost 30 years old, but it definitely brings me back to that time frame. Just even the smell of the interior. So we've got some curves coming up here. You know, obviously keeping this car at the right boost levels is important, just from the driving experience perspective. So we're still running at pretty low RPMs here. Torque is pretty muted at these levels, but again, get that boost at the right level, and I think it's going to be a much more engaging experience. Definitely want to keep the boost levels right to really get that kind of constant torque. The car feels really nimble. You know, I think that's the difference between the Gallardo. It does feel a little heavier. The all-wheel drive gives it a different impression too from a steering perspective. So again, a lot of differences between these cars. You know, gated 6-speed versus the 5-speed here. As a 5-speed, these are all driving gears. You know, you're not just flipping through to get to the next gear. You know, you want to keep that, the boost level up, at least for a spirited drive. Shifter obviously feels a lot different, you know, gated versus not gated, but this one you can, you know, you get a lot of feel right back through the gearing. I mean, you can actually feel things engaging. There's a lot of feedback that you get from the shifter as well. That's really nice. Yeah, upper RPMs, it's got a lot of torque. It really is pushing you. Turbo lag isn't intense. It's you know, if you're into that range to start, it's not a huge kind of blast. So we're finishing up the drive here. In summary, again, from a driving position, from the seats, the feel, I mean, it's just really nice driver experience. Shifter, I love the feedback you get from it. Brake pedal feels nice. Clutch is not super light. Car's very responsive, excellent vision all around. Performance-wise, you know, keeping it in the, you know, 3,500 range if you really want to have an enjoyable drive with a lot of torque right at your disposal is really fun. Takes the curves really nicely. Car feels nimble. You know, I've heard others say 964 is their, you know, ultimate driver's 911. I could see why people would say that. It's got the really good mixture of, there's some newer technology from the 930 model, but you still are, this is all driver experience. This is no computer assist kind of helping you along. Not that that's a bad thing at times, but from a driving experience, it's a car where you feel like you can drive it fairly safely at its limits, not limits, but in a good range where you're getting a lot of enjoyment out of the entire experience. I have to say, most enjoyable experience, that's for sure. I really like the way this car drives and the experience that it provides. Certainly a favorite of mine from all the cars we've driven so far.
Alright, so this is definitely one of the heavier clutches of cars that I've driven in a while. Not too heavy, but it's just a little bit heavier. So again, 964 turbos, the 91, so this is the return of the 911 Turbo. And it's kind of an interesting story with these cars, right? So the 911 Turbo first came out in '76, non-intercooled car. It was actually the first production car with the turbo. So, you know, the only car for a while. Saab obviously had some turbos in the 70s and 80s, but not that many cars out there did. 911s were not sold in the US, or I should say 911 turbos were not sold in the US from 80 to 85. So those cars, if you do see them, were gray market cars that were brought over, but then they were brought back into the States for 86 to 89. Okay, so those are still considered the 930 cars, 930 turbos. So they made some different upgrades once they came out in 86. So basically 86 to 88 cars are pretty similar. 89, it was a big improvement where they went to the G50 5-speed transmission, because prior to that there were 4 speeds. So the 89s definitely command a premium in the market, and they have for a while because of that. So 91, this one came and was you know, based on the brand new 964 platform, right? So, you know, the 964 was probably the Biggest change in 911 since they went to the longer wheelbase. So big changes, suspension, brakes, much more of a modern car. You have airbags, you have power steering, you have anti-lock brakes, you know, a little bit more of a update to the interior with the center console and some other things. But for the turbo itself, so it benefited from all those things, went to 17-inch wheels, but it used basically the same engine that was in the 930. So it was still the 3.3 liter turbo. They upgraded the turbo a bit, much bigger intercooler. You know, now had a dual out exhaust, which actually one of them is for the wastegate on the driver's side. But basically it was kind of a carryover engine-wise. So kind of interesting in that the new turbo, and it was a big deal when it came out, basically had kind of the powertrain that was much of a carryover from the 930s and can trace its back all the way back to the 70s. But it certainly works because, again, I think it kind of gives you that old school feel to it, but a little bit more modern looking cosmetics, which to me I think is like the perfect combination. So it's interesting, the fenders on this, again, traditional older 911 called the pontoon fenders, as people call it. Just kind of as we're going down the road here and just watching the trees and the clouds and things like that just reflect off it, and it just gives you a great visual sensation. It's just, you know, it's unique to the older 911s. It's just super cool. So this particular car has some modifications that makes it much more fun to drive. So it has aftermarket headers, which definitely helps with the boost spooling earlier, and it also has a 1-bar spring. Okay, so back then, before they had ECUs controlling boost, they used a spring in a wastegate. While there is some lag, it is much better than stock, particularly because of the headers. Normally, you would need to kind of stomp on the gas, and you could count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and then finally the engine would start to, the turbo would start to spool up, and you would get, you know, kind of thrown in your seat. This one, there is a hesitation, but not nearly like that. And then, you know, eventually when they went to the twin turbo in the 993s, that eliminated that lag even further. But so the modifications make it a lot more enjoyable to drive, but also definitely increase the power. So these cars stock were 315 horse. This one is probably running with the modifications in the ballpark of about 375 or so. I love the overrun when you let off the throttle on this. It sounds fantastic, and it just has a good overall feel. Again, I think it kind of marries the old school and new school really well. And why I really love driving this car is it feels different than pretty much anything else that you drive. And again, obviously, this is not a daily driver. It's something, you know, I enjoy every now and then, and I like the way that it feels different. It does not feel like a modern, you know, a modern car, you know, like say a newer 911, newer 911 turbo. They're stupid fast, but they just don't have the feel of the older cars. And I kind of like that difference in feel when I'm hopping in to, you know, do whatever with it, and it's just a different experience than what you get with the more modern cars. So let's get on the little highway here a little bit and see. It just pulls. It throws you back in the seat. Once you're on boost, it feels great. And I tell you, it feels like a much faster car than having you know, sub 400 horsepower. Because, I mean, 375, 400 horsepower, today's standards, is nothing, you know? I mean, that's a sports sedan, a small sports sedan. Never mind the M's and the AMGs that are 500, 600 plus horsepower. But it feels really fast, and that's the fun part, you know. You know, we're not out here racing on the streets or anything like that, so you have something that, you know, when you get on it a bit, it throws you back in your seat and puts a big smile on your face. It doesn't get much better than that. All right, so we're here for the wrap up now, right? So let's start with the exterior. Chris, what's your pick and why?
I'm probably going to say this a few times, so apologies in advance. Super close. You know, I know this is a tough decision for you. You mentioned it in the beginning. It's for me, the exterior, it's the turbo. I mean,
okay.
I mean, and they're both set up perfect. That's the funny thing. I mean, they're both absolutely perfect the way they're set up. So it's not just the models, but the cars. It's just the setups are absolutely spot on. But that look is just That's my dream car from when I was 6 years old. You know, until so
yeah. For me, it's really, really, really tough because they're just like totally different looking cars. But I gotta say, probably a hair towards the Gallardo, just a hair. I mean, as much as I love, and again, when I was trailing you, I was looking at it and stuff. But just the hair, I gotta say the Gallardo. And again, I love the old school look. I love the wide hips, the wide body. But I just a tiny little bit towards the Lambo, just a tiny bit. So okay, so split decision there.
Yeah.
Interior, what are you thinking?
Interior, I mean, that's one where it starts to just get the age of the cars kind of comes into it for me.
No doubt.
You know, I think that's pretty easy, the Lambo, just because it's just more modern, up to date.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Lambo for me as well. However, I'm much more comfortable in this car. Mm-hmm. You know, roofline on that is tough. You can see a lot better out of this car, but you know, the overall look, feel, you know, I prefer the
I kind of fit better into that too from a driving position. The seats were wrapped around me a little better in the turbo as well too, but still on an overall.
Yeah. All right. So both towards the Lambo. All right. So performance.
Performance. It's hard to compete with the Lambo. You know, given again the age difference, so a lot happens in that over a decade. So pure performance, you know, in an overall test drive perspective, I think I again go to the Gallardo.
Yeah, I would too. Again, just totally different feels, and I guess that we'll go into kind of what talks to you, but different approaches, as we said. I mean, you know, the turbo's giving up 100 plus horsepower. Yeah. Lambo's heavier for sure, but it's just a, you know, it's. I
still can't. It's coming right back to me how long that first gear is. You know, you're just looking at the tack like we're still okay. All right, we're going. We're going.
Yeah.
And then it just starts screaming with that exhaust too. It's just that's incredible. The torque all the way through.
Yeah. Okay, so which one talks to you?
So, I mean, in a lot of these, it's been really consistent with the performance for me on which one talks to me. But this one, it goes completely the opposite. I mean, the turbo completely talks to me in much different way. You know, that brings me back in time too. I mean, that feels like cars that you had when you were younger.
Yeah.
The smell of the interior, the whole, it speaks to me so much.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, you know, feedback for the driving. You know, no computers. It's all you. Yeah. It's all driving. The driving experience is just, I love it. Absolutely love it. Yeah. And again, I think in every category, I go back to what you said. I mean, these are small differences.
Yeah.
The speaking to was the biggest difference to me.
Yeah, and for me too as well. I mean, I remember the very first 911 that I drove. I was 19 years old, and it was the first turbo after that. And I went 3 blocks in 911, and I said, okay, I have to have one of these. And that was it. I mean, like literally, it like screamed in my head. But that's and with this car, it's the same thing. and I said this during the test drive. What I love about driving this car so much is it feels so different than every other car we drive today, because it just has that different feel. And when I go into one of the cars that you're just driving for pleasure, I want something that is different than what you experience every day, and that car is definitely different. And the boost, I mean, once it gets going, I mean, it throws you back in the seat, and it's just got that awesome sensation from that, so it's just overall
when we first started, I wish we had a little less traffic there, because I wanted to keep the boost at a nice level. And I think again, 5-speed. All driving gears, though, you're not just flipping through second and third gear. You're in third to keep the boost up, and it really gives you a much different experience when you have the boost at the right level. So there's more instant feedback and acceleration. It's way better.
And this car, as I mentioned again, with the modifications it has with the 1-bar spring and particularly the headers, it's a lot less laggy than the stock ones, because stock ones are pretty laggy. Again, particularly to today's standards, forget it. So it has that right amount of drivability to it, and I just love the way it drives. It just kind of puts a smile on my face every single time.
Same here.
So, all right. So, with all that said, which would you rather?
I know it's tough for you, because if you had to make the decision, right? You already made the decision twice. You have them both. It's unbelievably tough for me too. I go back to which one speaks to me, though. I think, that whole experience, it's different. They're a completely different experience. You went through how different these cars are, but overall, that experience, the driving experience, it's the turbo.
For me too. I mean, I think about it, and the way I think about it is say, okay, if I can only have one, which one would I have? And I would go back to the turbo. And I bought this car originally 15 years ago. I sold it and to buy a 993 turbo, and I had that for about a year and a half, and I said, you know what, I'm not liking it as much as the turbo, because I originally had a 930, then I bought this, and I bought the 993 turbo thinking I was going to keep that one for a long time. And to me, the 964 turbo is what I call the Goldilocks of the air-cooled turbos. So it just is. It still has the old school looks. It has that great sound. But like we said earlier, it's a little bit cleaned up from a cosmetic standpoint. It has a little bit more of the modern technology with the power steering, ABS, airbags, a little bit better handling, somewhat better air conditioning. But to me, it's just right. It's just.
Well,
just
you had all three. You came back to this and bought it again.
Right.
Bought it back.
Exactly.
Same car.
And
exact car.
I'm never selling it again.
So,
so for me, it's the turbo.
All right. So if you like the video, please hit the subscribe button.
And
We'd love to keep bringing these. Love to hear your comments as well too. This was a lot of fun for us, but I'd love to hear what other people think about this matchup. But until next time, enjoy the drive.